What up, my friends? Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we're going to go over all of the books that I read in the month of February. I'll provide a star rating for the book as well as a rating for the spice and then go over some thoughts that I have. I'll also include a little summary of the book so you know what to expect, but everything that I share will be spoiler free. I read 16 books in the month of February. I had a pretty good mix of contemporary romance, historical romance, and thriller. So let's dive into the first book. All right, the first book that I started off with for the month was a historical romance, and it was called A Night to Surrender by Tessa Dare. This one I gave a 4 out of 5 on stars, 1 out of 5 on spice. This one follows Susanna, who's made a name for herself amongst women as somebody who champions spinsters and creating a life that they can be proud of, even if they're not able to be marketed in society. She lives in the community of Spindle Cove, and there's this gorgeous property that's located there that her father has promised will be hers. But when a soldier he knows shows up, he decides to make him an earl and provide him the castle instead. So this one I felt like was so much more than a romance. It had a lot more depth to it, I would say. I really enjoyed reading it because there was such a beautiful sense of community. There was a lot of discussion around the value that women have and how that can look different for everybody. So I felt like that was incredibly refreshing. The reason why it wasn't a 5-star for me as much as I enjoyed it was just the pacing felt a little off to me. There were sections that dragged out a little bit more than necessary. I felt like the two characters were such a good match though. They really challenged one another. So it made the reading experience a lot more dynamic than I think a lot of romances do. So if you enjoy historical romances, this is one I would get on your list. Okay, the next one was called A Proper Scandal by Esther Hatch. This one I gave a 3 out of 5 on stars, 0 out of 5 on spice, so it is squeaky clean. This one follows Grace, who was orphaned and left to live in a pastor's home with his wife, when out of nowhere, her aunt and uncle, who have not really been interested in her, suddenly pull her from the home she's known and tell her that she needs to enter society. She starts to experience exactly how dangerous adult life can be, and she continues to run into the same man who seems to be the one that can protect her. This one just wasn't a complete love for me. I enjoyed the female character quite a bit. She felt very sheltered, and so a lot of her communication or the way that she held back seemed to be really genuine and realistic, especially given the time frame. The relationship though, it just never felt very natural to me, or it never felt like there was enough of a connection between the two. It felt a little forced in the writing. So I just never really connected to the love story or to the male character really. Overall though, if you're looking for a historical romance and you've read a lot like I have, I don't think I would say don't pick this one up. It just wasn't my favorite. The next one is a contemporary romance. It's called Meet Me in the Margins by Melissa Ferguson. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 on stars, 0 out of 5 on spice. So this one follows Savannah, who has had a dream forever to write her own book, and she actually works in the publishing industry. One of her connections ends up presenting her an incredible opportunity, but there is a time frame on it, and she ends up getting help from a very unlikely source in almost a pen pal situation. Okay, so this one I felt like was an incredibly unique book. There's kind of like a hidden identity, you've got mail vibe going on. Basically what happens is the main female character is trying to write a book. Editor that she's trying to land it with lets her know that it's way too rough to even be edited yet. She ends up leaving the manuscript in this secret location at work, and someone starts to write editing notes in the margins, and they don't know who each other are. So they're kind of like going back and forth, and during the correspondence inside the margins on this book, they start to develop feelings for one another. I think that what I loved most about this book is that it's a book about writing. So the fact that it was a book that's about writing a book and working at a publishing company and kind of like the ins and outs of an actual book world is what made me as a reader love it as much as I did. I feel like the characters, I could have gotten a stronger connection and chemistry from them because of the nature of the interactions, I guess you could say. They never really got deep enough for me to be fully committed. But overall, if you're looking for a romance that's just a little bit different and has a strong plot to it, I definitely would say pick this one up. Okay, you guys, the next one, I don't even know what to say. This one was a thriller, and it's called Sometimes I Lie by Alice Feeney. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 on stars, and spice rating, I don't want to give it a rating because it's almost a spoiler if I give a rating, so I just want to say there is spice in there. There are graphic scenes, I would say, and I would definitely recommend checking trigger warnings before heading into the book so you're aware of the type of content in it. So this one follows Amber, who ends up waking up in the hospital in a coma, and she can hear everything going on around her, but nobody thinks she's awake yet. As she's getting visitors, she's starting to have some concerns that both her husband and her sister had something to do with her ending up in a coma. Okay, so this one was a wild ride, you guys. It is insane. There were so many twists and turns that there were points where I had to reread some paragraphs and even like half a chapter in order to make sure I was comprehending what I was reading. It was one of those styles. I am gonna say though that I don't know that I would rush to read this book or that I would even strongly recommend it. Unless you're the type of person that really wants to go on like a psychological roller coaster. There were points of this book where I was so thoroughly confused, and I never read other people's reviews before I do my own. So I went and put my own review down, and then after I did, I kind of wanted to see what other people thought, and I was not alone in that. There was a bunch of people that were thoroughly confused, and some giving very low ratings because they never really figured it out, and I'm not even 100% sure I figured it out. It was just a little bit on the confusing side. But again, if you're looking for something that will have twists and turns that you just don't expect and maybe don't even thoroughly understand, and you want to be challenged in a thriller, this would be the one for you. My style is more like the quick-paced thriller. I love a psychological thriller, but I like it to not be too complex. So those are more my style. If you're like me, you may not end up enjoying this one. All right, the next one was a short story, The Fall Risk by Abby Jimenez. This one I gave a 5-star rating. There's no spice in it, so 0 out of 5 on spice. So this one has Charlotte and Seth, and they are neighbors that do not know one another. And when something happens to their apartment building, they end up kind of getting stuck together for an entire weekend. And although neither of them are looking for love, they cannot deny the feelings that there are between them. This one was less than 100 pages, so you would think that it was just short and sweet, which it was. But Abby Jimenez somehow just does so much with 100 pages. It's absolutely unbelievable. I probably would have loved this story if it was 350 or 400 pages, because I know she would have made it work. But somehow she pulls off so much in a short story, and it just was swoon-worthy, and there was so much depth to the story without needing a bunch of filler. If you're kind of like in a rut, or maybe you need a palate cleanser after a hard book, this might be one to pick up because it was just so adorable, and she just does no wrong in my eyes. All right, the next book, talking about an author that can do no wrong in my eyes. This one is It's a Love Story by Annabel Monaghan. This one was actually sent to me from the author and publisher, and I am providing my feedback honestly and voluntarily. I gave this one a 5 out of 5 for stars, and it has like 0.5 out of 5 for spice. Not enough to give it a full pepper, but it's got a little bit of spice in there. And this one is expected to release on May 27th of this year. This one follows Jane, who actually grew up as the beloved and awkward sidekick on a sitcom, and a connection from her past may be what she needs in order to get a very important project greenlit at her work. In order to reach that connection, she's gonna have to really put herself on the line, and she ends up getting teamed up with a guy that ruined one of her previous projects, so she is not happy about it. Here's the thing about Annabel Monaghan. Her love stories are incredibly straightforward. I feel like I've given this feedback about her books before, and I don't want this to come across as a negative way, because her writing is absolutely dynamic and absolutely beautiful. But what it feels like is you're getting to read like one of your best friends, their story in a blog post, if that makes sense, but like a very upgraded blog post. Her love stories always feel like something that you can relate to, and it's like either it's happened to you or somebody that you know, so it's easy to sink into the stories. I feel like she also does a really good job at balancing maturity and messiness without it veering into like a toxic drama, gossipy situation. She writes just such emotionally rich characters, and they're never just about the romance. There's always some type of a journey that the characters are going through. There is something so special and unique about her writing. If you have not picked up something from Annabel Monaghan, please do. I have loved every single book that I've read from her thus far. I was on some type of lucky streak, you guys, because the next book was another contemporary romance. This one was called First Time Caller by B.K. Borison. This one I gave a 5 out of 5 for stars, 1 out of 5 for spice. So this one's about Aiden, who's a radio host who started to feel a little bit jaded, and his entire show is about giving relationship advice, but he's starting to feel like love probably doesn't exist. Everything starts to shift for him when a young girl calls in trying to get help for her mom, Lucy. The producer of his show decides that it might be fun to try and find Lucy a love match, and he starts to feel not only a spark for radio again, but also for Lucy. This book, what I loved about this book is it was quick. It was like quick wit, quick fire, quick situations, quick chapters, just everything about it had like this perfect speed and pace to it that I just loved. And it wasn't just the two lovebirds in the story. It was like everybody in the cast of characters. They all had such a beautiful, witty banter about them where the love was just overwhelming, but they were pushing each other's buttons a little bit, and there was just something so great about it. B.K. Borison, I loved the Lovelight Farms series from her. She has this beautiful way of writing like a small town community aspect. And it's like in this book, although it's not set in a small town, you got that overwhelming sense of found family. This book is an absolute treasure. The plot was familiar but also different. This book was apparently based on Sleepless in Seattle, which is probably why the word familiar in terms of the plot comes to play. But I have something to admit to you guys. I've actually never watched Sleepless in Seattle. I know. I love romantic comedies or romance in general, so I don't know what's wrong with me. I need to watch that. But anyways, this book I just felt like just did such a beautiful job at just giving me all of the elements that I love in a romantic comedy. Okay, the next one was called The Kiss Lottery by Ilsa Madden Mills. And this one I gave a 4 out of 5 on stars and 1 out of 5 on spice. So this one was short and sweet. It was a novella. It follows Everly, who recently returned to her hometown because she received a secret invitation to the annual Kiss Lottery in Rose, Tennessee. Everly is hoping that it'll be some good content for her podcast, but she's not looking forward to running into Beckett because she knows that they'll both have to face feelings that they don't want to. This one I enjoyed a lot. If you like the movie Sweet Home Alabama, I think you would also like this book. I do think that it would have benefited from being a full book though, because there was points that just felt kind of like disconnected and rushed. But overall, if you're looking just for a really fun, easy to read rom-com, this one would be a cute one to pick up. Okay, now the next book is called Off to the Races by Elsie Silver. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 on stars and 2 out of 5 on spice. It's a spicy contemporary romance and it's kind of like got a cowboy vibe to it. This one follows Billy, who is a very talented horse trainer. Her mentor ends up reaching out to her about an opportunity to train some horses for an exclusive ranch. But it comes at the price that she's going to have to work with the rich and entitled boss named Vaughn Harding. But she's intrigued enough by the opportunity to risk it. All right, so this one, I did enjoy it quite a bit. Elsie Silver wrote the Chestnut Springs series that a lot of people are obsessed with. I want to say the first book is called Reckless. I might be wrong though. But anyways, it's called the Chestnut Springs series and everybody like went wild about it. It went viral on pretty much every social media platform. I liked it, but I wasn't like everybody else. I didn't think it was anything like insane. This one was really cute. You can tell that this one was written pre Chestnut Springs because the writing is definitely a little bit more, I don't want to say juvenile, but it's just a little bit more simple. It felt like they were trying to push the fact that it was enemies to lovers, but the enemies to lovers thing kind of fizzles out pretty quick and it turns more into like a workplace romance situation, and there's kind of like a push and pull slow burn type thing, and then all of a sudden it kind of explodes out of nowhere. So it just felt like the pacing was a little weird to me. It didn't build up in the way that I kind of would hope for in an enemies to lovers. But overall, I will say that the setting and the horse that's in this book made the book for me. So if you're really looking for some type of like cowboy romance type vibe, the vibes in this one were vibing. So the next one was called A Photo Finish, and this was also by Elsie Silver. This is the second in the series. This one follows another character from the first one, and she is actually the sister of all of the brothers from Chestnut Springs. So if you read the Chestnut Springs series from Elsie Silver, this is the baby sister. Her own book is in this series. So that was interesting. I didn't even know she had a book. I gave this one a 3 out of 5 on stars and 2 out of 5 on spice. So this one follows Violet, who has always been the quiet one. She was the one that had overprotective older brothers, so she always kind of had to put herself in a little box and not not let her personality shine. However, she takes a risk and puts herself online, but it turns out her boss's brother had access to some of the things that she put online, and she finds out that he knows about it. They end up having to stay in the same house together and try to work through the feelings that they had from their online relationship. I don't know, this one just wasn't a love for me. It's not one that I would recommend rushing out to read. I just never could get invested in it because it just felt like something was missing between their story. I feel like the backstories on both of the characters is what kept me invested in, what kept me reading, but the actual connection between the two of them just never really did anything for me. So overall, I was happy to have read it because it was interesting to see Violet, because I knew all of the brothers from the Chestnut Spring series, and her name comes up in those books. So it was interesting to kind of have her point of view, but I don't know, overall it just wasn't my favorite. All right, you guys, the next one. Ooh, it was wild. So this is a thriller. It's called When You Disappeared by John Mars. And this one I gave a 4 out of 5 on stars. And again, there is spice, but I don't want to give a spoiler. So just check content/trigger warning before diving into this. There are some scenes in this book. So this one follows Catherine, who wakes up one morning to find that her husband is missing. After spending an entire day going through every scenario she can think of, he's simply just gone. She knows him so well, and she knows that he would have not just disappeared from her life, but everyone around her is convinced that he must have taken off. 25 years later, he shows up on her doorstep, ready to tell her exactly what happened. Okay, so I keep seeing this author recommended in almost every Facebook group and Instagram reel that I see. So I knew that I wanted to read it, and he is actually available on Kindle Unlimited. And what was so funny about this, I was changing a diaper. My 3-year-old son got a hold of my Kindle, and he took it off to the side and was playing with it and somehow downloaded this book. And I was like, that's really funny because I've wanted to read something from this author, so I guess it was just meant to be. My son ended up picking a very wild book. The first half of this book, I almost gave up on it because there's what feels like a lot of unnecessary filler. Then at the halfway mark, it just takes a turn, and all of a sudden you're just locked in and you need to know what happens. It's hard for me to give my full thoughts because I want to keep it spoiler free. But I will just say, if you're looking for a book that dives into the kind side of human nature, this book would not be the one for you. This book has some very unimaginable situations happening in it, and I would definitely look into trigger warnings before you dive into it. It was kind of a very heavy read. I think that if you're looking for a heavy read with lots of twists and turns that kind of has a slow build to it, if that's the style thriller that you like, this would be one to pick up. But just know that I want to warn you that the content is not at all fluffy. It's not fluffy content whatsoever. So the next book is called If We Ever Meet Again, and it's by Huang. I hope I said it correctly. This one is a spicy romance. I gave it a 2 out of 5 on stars and 2 out of 5 on spice. This one was also sent to me by the author and publisher, but I am providing obviously an honest feedback, and it's all voluntary. So this one follows Farah, who is studying abroad when she meets a college football star named Blake, and they both seem to have an undeniable attraction towards one another, but she's all about serious relationships and he's all about not being serious about anything. I don't ever like to dog books, but this one just felt really juvenile to me. It kind of felt I don't know if you guys have ever binged a mafia series of books where you can't put it down, but you're also just annoyed the entire time. That's kind of how I felt with this one. The characters were just not it for me. It's a college-based romance, so maybe if that's the vibe you're looking for. The story was pretty good. It does, unfortunately, end on a cliffhanger. I felt like there was so much unnecessary filler in this book. So when I got to the end and it wasn't even done yet, I was so annoyed. So then I had to dive into book number 2, which is called If the Sun Never Sets. Same author, obviously. This one I gave a 2.5 out of 5, and Spice again was a 2 out of 5. So this one follows that couple, and it kind of does a timeline jump, and I don't want to give any spoilers from the first one. There was a significant leap in time, so their age had gone up. I felt like their maturity kind of went up, but not enough for me. It wasn't enough for me to be able to relate at the ripe old age of 38 years old. But I have absolutely no interest in continuing on in the series because the answers that I needed from the first one to make me be done with these books was thankfully resolved. but overall it's just not a strong recommend from me. Now, if you are looking for a really good series, that same author has a series called Kings of Sin. It starts with King of Wrath, and I absolutely loved those. So if you're looking for a binge-worthy series, that was really great. And what was nice about those ones is there's no cliffhangers to my knowledge. So it's kind of just like different couples that are all connected to one another, but really could be read as standalone. You'll just have some background characters, but I absolutely loved that series. Okay, now the next one I've been meaning to read for literally ever. This is one of my favorite authors. It's called The Match by Sarah Adams. This one I gave a 4 out of 5 on Stars, 0 out of 5 on Spice. This is one of her earlier books, and I fell in love with her because of the When in Rome series. So I was excited to read this one. This one follows Evie, who grew up in Charleston, South Carolina, and her family is very established and very wealthy. She's always felt like she did not fit with them and that she was never enough, especially once she started having seizures. She was finally able to find a true companion when she was matched with a service dog for her medical issues. She ends up meeting Jacob through her company because his daughter needs a match just like she did. However, he's not convinced it's the best next step for his family. So this one was really cute. Overall, I really liked the story. I thought that the plot was really cute. I really enjoyed reading into the whole service animal piece. I thought that was a really unique and interesting way for them to have kind of a meet cute situation. I also enjoyed the fact that it was like a single dad who was on the grouchy side, and Miss Sunshine is coming in with her cute dog and making dreams come true. That part was really good. I just felt like there was not that much depth to the story. It definitely has some key elements that I love about Sarah Adams. It's just not on the level of the books that I read now from her, but overall I think it was cute and definitely worth my time. All right, next up I was jonesing for a historical romance, so I picked up When He Was Wicked by Julia Quinn. This is the 6th book in the Bridgerton series, and this one follows Francesca. Francesca got very lucky when she married her husband because she had a true love match and got to marry her very best friend. She's even luckier because he has a cousin who has become her best friend as well. However, when tragedy strikes, she ends up not only losing her husband, but his cousin as well. You guys, so far, this is my favorite Bridgerton book. I just absolutely loved this book. I feel like it was handled so well. There was so much emotion happening. I would definitely recommend checking trigger warnings before reading because there are a lot of really deep situations that are happening, and a lot of them are pretty tragic. I just absolutely loved the connection between the characters and how it was explored and how it was handled. There was a really great witty banter going on despite the fact that there was a lot of deeper topics happening. The author ends up working in some comedic relief to make it a little bit easier to handle. And I am just in love with the mom of the Bridgerton clan, Violet Bridgerton. She is just the cutest, and she shows up in the biggest ways in this book. She is the mother I aspire to be because she has, I think there's 8 Bridgerton children altogether. She knows that she needs to apply different parenting techniques to each child. And being a mom myself to 3, it's just very inspiring to read. It's like something I probably would have not even noticed before, but it's something that I always remind myself of, is that although my 3 children are biologically related, they are 3 completely different humans, and 2 of them were a buy one get one free situation. They showed up the same day. They're twins. They're still different people. So when I do parenting, I have to make sure I'm applying different strategies to each of them and remember that they need different versions of me. And Violet Bridgerton just does that with such grace, and it's just so cute to read. Overall, I just love the series, but this one was definitely my favorite of all of them. All right, and then wrapping it up, and this one cracks me up when I tell you guys what happened. This one's The Enemy by Sarah Adams. So this is the 2nd in the Charleston series from the book that I read, The Match, a little while ago. This one I gave a 3.5 out of 5 on Stars and 0 out of 5 on Spice. This one follows June, who's very proud of the bakery that she built from the ground up herself, and she is super excited because her arch nemesis is returning to town for their best friend's wedding, and she cannot wait to rub her success in this guy's face. However, when he shows up, she finds out that he's apparently even more successful than her, and he has no problem rubbing it in her face. So the funny story I have to tell you guys about this one is I read this book book, wrote my review. I thought it was adorable, but I just didn't love it. I didn't ever connect with the characters. They were kind of like irritating, and there was never that strong of a connection between them. And it just kind of felt like not much was going on. There wasn't much happening. There wasn't much plot. So it just wasn't a favorite. I wasn't mad I read it. I also wouldn't recommend that someone rush out to read it. So I write up my whole review. I go to put it in Goodreads because I write it in the notes app. I go to put it in Goodreads. And I already have a review there. Turns out I read this book in 2022. I've had this happen before where I've read like a couple chapters of a book and I've been like, this feels really familiar. And then I'll go check Goodreads and I'll be like, oh yeah, I already read this, duh. This time I read the entire book with absolutely no inclination that I had read it 3 years prior. That kind of tells you that this book is a little on the forgettable side and probably not one I'd like strongly recommend. It was just too funny too, because when I went to go log my current review, the verbiage that I wrote from my past review was almost identical and I gave the same star rating. So obviously my thoughts are consistent on it, but I just thought that was hilarious and I had to share. So those are all of the books that I read in the month of February. If you read a really good book in the month of February, please let me know down below what it was. I do want to go over my top 3 books. That way, if you guys are looking for a place to start when you go to your library app or go to a bookstore or something, I have you covered with my top 3 reads. So in no particular order, I would say my top 3 reads are First Time Caller by B.K. Borison, When He Was Wicked by Julia Quinn, and The Fall Risk by Abby Jimenez. I will say that It's a Love Story by Annabel Monaghan would have beat out When He Was Wicked, but that one doesn't release till May, so that doesn't really seem fair. So I'm going to go with the 3 that I know you could get access to either by purchasing them or going to your library. In the month of March, my goals are I need to finish the book that I'm reading about the state of Maine. It's called A Lobster Coast. I'll put the picture up on the screen. It's fascinating, but it's just taking me forever to get through it. I don't know why. So I would love to finish that up. I also was super aggressive with the amount of books that I took out from Libby. One of them is actually, if you guys ever watched the TV show Bones, I think it's actually based on a very long series. Like there's like 20 to 30 books about Temperance Brennan. And I've always wanted to read that series, so I did check out the first one from the library, so I would love to get that one read. One of my friends had recommended a book called The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. She had read another book by him that was like super creepy, she said, but she said that she really loved this one, and this one was available, but the other one wasn't, so I checked this one out. I'm a little nervous though, because she said it was a wild ride, so we're gonna see. I also want to read Wild at Heart by K.A. Tucker. I really loved The Simple Wilds by her, so I've always been meaning to continue on in the series and just haven't, so I have that on my radar to read this month. The other one that I have on my radar is I really want to read The Cinnamon Bun Bookstore by Lori Gilmore. I read Pumpkin Spice Cafe, I think is what it's called. I know a lot of people really loved it, but I don't know, it was okay. I loved the autumn-y vibes that were happening, and there was kind of like a Gilmore Girls town situation happening, but overall it just wasn't a strong love for me. I did start Cinnamon Bun Bookstore, and it started off a little bit stronger for me than the other one did, so that's great. I do have some book of the months that are coming. The Lincoln Highway, I can't remember the name of the author, and then also The Lion Women of Tehran. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly. That came strongly recommended to me, and I was excited because it was an option with Book of the Month because it was a Book of the Year finalist. I actually got that one for free. It came for free with my subscription. So let me know what you've been reading, if there's something that you've loved recently. Thank you guys so much for spending a little bit of your day with me. I hope you're walking away with at least one book that you could go pick up and have a great time with. I hope I delivered whatever you needed when you clicked on that thumbnail, and I hope you have a magical day. Bye!